Hey baby, it's the 70s. Disco ruled. You're watching Barber Dave's Barbershop at Home shave across the decade. Hey man, the 70s were about groovy peace and listening to psychedelic music. But I can't say one thing groovy, man. I can say disco. Disco sucks.
Over time I noticed there's nothing about this that ever feels quite normal. Kinda like we're always in a free fall. And if I had a time machine, I'd tell you, darling, it's not gonna be so bad. But knowing me, I wouldn't.
Hey everybody, welcome back. Okay, so before we get started, right down here, www.theshavingcadre.com. Please come and visit us. We'd certainly appreciate it. Also, right over here, Drinks and Dave's. Our next show will be next Monday at 6 p.m. Pacific. We had a wonderful show last night. I hope you were able to join. And also, right down here, you'll see something right across the bottom. We'd certainly appreciate it. Hopefully everybody is enjoying our shaves across the decades. This is our last one for the week, and this will be 1970 to 1980. Now let's discuss this. As you saw in the opening, there was two diametrically opposed forces at work in the 1970s, and the argument could be made that the 1960s, even though a horrible decade for the United States, was also one of the Renaissance times for traditional shaving. And really the 60s are what has caused the resurgence overall as of today for wet shaving. So if the 60s ended with Apollo saving the 1960s, the 1970s decided to say, hold my beer and we'll go a different way. So you had the end of the Vietnam War, which ended in embarrassment. You had Apollo ending because of budget cuts. You had gas prices going through the roof and gas lines with inflation. And you saw the death of wet shaving. And what I mean by that is it was all about convenience. So the shaving companies such as Gillette started going in a different direction, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes. More importantly, you had two types of music. You had a little bit of the psychedelic rock that was still kind of around from the 1960s. However, there was a new form of music, and it destroyed music for a while, and it was called disco. Now, remember, it was a whole thing. It wasn't just the music. It was the clothing. Men wore platform shoes. Men wore Angel Flight suits with big silk shirts wide open with gold chains. There was funky hats, big afros, and so forth. So for humanity, for those aliens that are watching, for humanity, I do apologize for the clothes for the 70s. However, there was hope. There was a light at the end of the tunnel. What that was rock and roll. Now, I, being a teenager in the 1970s, started out normal, and then I started becoming aware, and then unfortunately in 1978 when I was 13 my father passed away, but that in itself set forward the motions of where I am today as far as shaving and some other things and stuff like that, so we'll go into that as well. So for me personally, and for those of us that were born in the 60s, that were teenagers in the 70s, it was a really wild time, and here's why. We started out with the disco, and so I had my Angel Flight shirt, I had my Angel Flight pants, I had my Tom McCann platform shoes to be disco cool, and then an epiphany happened. I was fortunate in 1976 to see a relatively unknown band by the name of Kiss. Now, when they came out, that was called glam rock, and just the beginnings of it. And all these bands that you'll see in the 1980s kind of looked at Kiss. But the thing is, if you liked Kiss, you could get beaten up because nobody wore makeup on stage, but the music was hard pounding, Detroit Rock City, party all night, and festival seating, which means that you didn't have a seat, you just got pushed up against the fences until they opened it up. And you found a type of substance that was very foggy in the air, and it opened up your mind to things. Yes, I'm speaking of the ganja. And so I saw Kiss, and believe it or not, Cheap Trick was an opening band. Nobody had ever heard of Cheap Trick. Well, so then I started thinking, and I looked at my disco side, and I looked at my rock and roll side, and the rock and roll side felt a whole heck of a lot better. So then after Kiss, it was Ted Nugent, Uriah Heep, Black Sabbath, longer hair, and yes, disco sucked. Now, as I've gotten older, there's certain parts of disco that I appreciate, but not very many. So that's kind of the evolution of the 70s. Now, where shaving comes along is the 70s destroyed shaving. People wanted it inconvenient. They wanted to get out. So they were using electrics or the beginnings of what they call cart shaving. Now, we're not going to do that. I won't go that far. However, today we are going to be using two different. And since the 70s is kind of an homage to my dad and my father-in-law, we're going to be using razors that they both had. Now, this one is a Black Beauty, super adjustable, super speed. Now, this was not my father's. This was a very good friend who passed away on the cadre that I received in the box, NOS. And so this dates to the early 1970s. The other one, and it's actually, this is the evolution of this. This is a 1963 Fat Boy that did belong to my father-in-law, but my dad shaved with these. And probably the quintessential fragrance of the 1970s, aside from your Old Spice and your Aqua Velva and your Menon Skin Bracer, was the one and only Brut. Joe Namath loved it. Everybody loved it. And my dad used it religiously. So we're going to be using both the aftershave and the cologne for the Brut. I don't have any of the original Fabergé left anymore, unfortunately. I know I have the bottle here somewhere, but it is now owned by Helen of Troy, I believe, which I believe Dana bought it after that. But either way, it still has the classic Brut fragrance. Now, we are, however, you're going to notice that a brush is no longer here. Yes, because we are going to embrace the 70s by using the standard Barbasol for pass 1, Gillette Foamy for pass number 2, and this is period specific, and I was fortunate to find this. That's right, Brut made a shave foam with the fragrance. So that's kind of our shave for today for the 70s. So we hope everybody's doing well. Oh, this is weird. I haven't shaved with a foam in ages. So again, for our first one, we're going to do the standard. I don't even know if these work. We're going to use, yeah, this one may not work. This is Foamy, or Barbasol. Now, it does have that wonderful Barbasol smell, but I think the, oh, there it goes. Like I said, these have not been used in ages. Yeah, this one's done. But it does have that wonderful Barbasol smell that that Rive Gauche Pour Homme was actually fashioned after. And this is that lovely chemically laden foam that we all love so much. Yeah, so anyways. So we will go ahead and use the Super Speed for the first pass. This does have this is set on 7. And it does have a Persona Lab blue blade in it. So the blades are not period specific because I do have the Gillette blades that came with all these, but I don't know where they're at. Now, when shaving with a foam, yes, it's quick, it's fast, it's easy, but it's gross. You can tell that there's a chemical on your skin that is not what it should be. But I will say these foamy versions are much better than the gels that came out later. The gels, if you look at their ingredients list, Some of the same properties that they do to embalm people is in those things, like formaldehyde. It's gross. And believe it or not, some of those things in the gels are, I guess I've read that they can be like carcinogens. So it's okay for the first pass, but the razor doesn't get a chance to play like it should. So now we're going to move for pass number 2, if this works, to the Gillette Foamy. There we go. Now we're cooking. Yes, this is a thick, creamy, foamy, chemically laden fake soap that is just wonderful. Although it's much better than the Barbasol. Now the smell on this, I would say, is very antiseptic, is the way I would put it. And being antiseptic, I would say it smells like hospital room, alcohol, and some chemical that you have no idea what it's like. Is it thick? Yes. Is it slick? Yeah, pretty much. But here's the key. When you put that foam in the sink, when you have extra, it's kind of like one of those fake ice cream cones. It'll sit there and float. I'm watching it right now, and it's not dissipating. So what does that tell you? And I think I said this already, but both of these razors are set on 7. Now we're going to be using the Fat Boy. Oops. What are you doing, David? I already did that. When looking at the Black Beauty, or the Super Adjustable rather, and the Fat Boy, the Super Adjustable is nice, but it is nowhere near as smooth as the Fat Boy. Nowhere near as smooth. Now, the blades are about the same age, so I don't think it's the blades. But it's just a smoother razor overall. So that's half the first pass, and the Gillette Foamy is still sitting in a blob in the sink, and it's not even dissipating. What does that tell you? What's going on here? So like I said, we weren't too smart in the 70s, apparently. But it was all about quickness and forgiveness. And most guys did not even do 3 passes. It was 1 pass, out the door, let's go. And they would spend 16 hours on their hair for going to the discotheque, but they wouldn't spend the time to do a good shave. So like I said, the initial death of traditional shaving was in the 70s. Didn't get much better in the 80s. But starting in the 90s, when I got into traditional shaving again and straight razors, things started to turn around again. So for the 1980s, I don't know what I'm going to shave with, but it won't be this crap. I mean, look at this. Okay, so it's been in the sink for, what, a whole pass? It's still just as thick. What does that tell you? It's got crazy, crazy preservatives. Okay, we're going to finish up period specific, I think, with, and I'm not sure if this is going to work either, because this is from the 1970s. I don't know if this will work, and this is the Brute foam. It works. Now, this one actually might be enjoyable. It does smell just like Brute. Oh, that's a nice smell. But again, does it have the wonderful properties to save your face? No. But it smells like Brute. So that makes up for it. I remember plenty of times, especially in the late 60s, watching my dad shave with Brute. And he also loved Royal Bay Rum that he used. But mostly it was Brute all the time. And I started shaving just about the time that he died. And so I used all of his Brute stuff. But I also remember him teaching me how in the early 70s how to shave using Brute. And so that's why Brute will always have a very special place in my heart. Now, I'm doing something they didn't do in the 70s. I'm rubbing this in to make a better shave. But most of the time they just slathered it on. But when you compare this foam to the nasty gels of today, this is so much better. I mean, but again, I'm going to stick this in the sink. And yes, our friend Foamy is still alive. I'll be willing to bet that this little snowman will be here at the end of the shave. In fact, it's floating on top of the water. That is just gross beyond things. Okay. I'm going to do one final pass with this on the half of the face, and then one final pass with the Fat Boy, because that's what my dad shaved with. And my wife's dad. So kind of finish up the 70s with a tribute. Yeah, the Super Speed, or the Black Beauty Super Speed, whatever you want to, super adjustable, is just not as smooth as the Fat Boy, in my opinion. A great razor, and I don't use it too much because Ed was such a good friend on the cadre, and this was NOS, and I like to keep it as pristine as possible. But you know, you got to use it. I'm sure Ed would have wanted us, those of us that got razors, to use it. Okay, we're going to finish it up with the Fat Boy. I mean, like I said, out of all three of these shaving creams or canned foam that I used, the Brute was by far the best, the smoothest, and felt the closest to a real soap, even though, you know, you could play with little, put a sail in that thing and sail it across the lake. Yeah, it's not even moving. I would show you a picture, but you'll all throw up. But the technology served its purpose, I guess. Okay. Now, let's see if I can actually empty the sink. Yeah, that actually has some residual slickness to it. It actually has some feeling that's not bad. But see, here's the cool thing. This stuff was in the sink, floating across the top, and I can use it again for cleanup. That's how bad this is. I mean, overall, a BBS shave for sure. Yeah, I'd say BBS, not DS BBS. But what's amazing is when you... I still can't get this to go down the sink. It makes you really appreciate, for those of you folks that are just starting in traditional shaving, that say, soaps are soap. No, they're not. This is, you really appreciate what we have as far as our soap makers and everything from today, comparably. Now, it was a smooth shave. However, the alum is a little bit stingy, and that could be for a couple of reasons, but more than likely, it's because that the alum has a chemical reaction with the nuclear crap that's in some of these things. I'm kidding, of course. But yeah, I would say let's clean up the brush, but we didn't have one, which is really messing me up because, you know, you get into a flow. And I guess, you know, nah. Can I ever see going back to something like this? No. But it is good to see the nostalgic shave. So real quick before we go to the aftershave and the alum and all that, or the witch hazel. So part of the shave was done with a 1970s super adjustable Black Beauty Super Speed. Beautiful razor. Was NOS when I got it. The other half was done with a mid 60s Fat Boy, which was the daddy to that super adjustable. This was done more because of nostalgia, because this did belong to my wife's father, who I never got a chance to meet, unfortunately. Let's rate the crap foam that we used on our face. Well, sadly, and I think this was only because the fluorocarbons that ruin the earth weren't working very well, was the Barbasol. That was the worst of them all. The foamy was okay, except it smelled very synthetic, very... and then, of course, the best one, believe it or not, was the one from the 1970s, and that's the Brute foam. All three were not what I would consider on par for shaving soaps, and that they're still kind of in the sink, because you have to literally wipe your sink down with sandpaper to get rid of some of the residual. No, I'm kidding. For our witch hazel today, we are going to be using Thayer's Lemon. Now, all of this was not used in the 70s. These guys, I mean, you know, my dad as well, as my dad had to get to the hospital for work, and so him and my mom worked together. I mean, she was a nurse, and so they drove together across town. They worked at St. Mary's Hospital, which was on the far edge of the other side of town. But so my dad would do the quick shave, boom, aftershave, spritz the bay rum or the cologne, and boom, off he went. And of course, my dad, and for those of you that remember the 70s, there was a company called Munsingwear. Munsingwear had these polos that had the little penguin on them. And my dad had tons and tons of those, along with alpaca sweaters, cardigan alpaca sweaters. That was big in the 70s for adults. Okay, Brute aftershave. This is a newer version of the aftershave, but hey, it's still Brute. That's one thing I will say for Brute. They kept that wonderful, wonderful fragrance that is just... I think they call Brute the art of manliness, and I would say that that's probably right. We're not going to forget the talc today. Now, my dad never did the talc thing too much. I think he did when he went to the barber shop, and I'll have to tell you that story, that me becoming a barber, it turns out that the barber that I went to from the time I was 6 years old to the time that I went in the military, and the barber that my dad went to, was trained by the very instructor that I went to and spent 3 years in barber school. So, and I'll have to relate that story one of these days on one of my videos, but it's kind of amazing. And we're going to be using the Special Reserve Cologne today, and I am running very low on this. But the bottle is the traditional, what even the aftershave, the body lotion, or excuse me, the body spray came in. This is what the original Brute bottles look like. This was kind of a retro thing for the Special Reserve, but it's wonderful. If I can get it to work. Maybe not. Yeah, I may be SOL on this. Let's see here. How many barbers does it take to get a thing? Yeah, that's not going to happen. I'll work on that afterwards. So anyways, hope you guys enjoyed this version of Shaves Across the Decades, 1970 to 1980. Got some fun ones coming up. Next week we'll have 1980 to 1990, 1990 to 2000, and 2000 to 2010. Those are going to be more normal, except the 1980s. You had big hair bands. Bon Jovi, Poison, Rat, Whitesnake. We've got some fun planned for that. So I hope everybody has a great remainder of the week. Please don't forget to comment. And if you have any ideas for the next series, please let us know as well. So I hope everybody has a wonderful, wonderful Tuesday, and we'll see you again next week. And I hope everybody, everywhere takes care, and thank you for watching.